What if Earth was shaped like a cube? At first, it sounds like something out of a video game. A blocky Minecraft planet with six giant faces and perfectly sharp corners. But what would really happen if our Earth wasn't round, but a giant cube floating in space? Let's start with gravity. On our round Earth, gravity pulls everything toward the center. On a cube Earth, things get complicated. On the flat faces of the cube, gravity would still try to pull you toward the center of the planet, which means you'd feel like you're standing normally. But the closer you get to the edges, the stranger things become. Gravity would pull you diagonally, tugging you toward the middle of a face. Walking near the corner would feel like climbing a steep hill, even though the ground looks flat. And what about the corners? If you stood right on one of the cube's edges, gravity would actually drag you sideways. In fact, it would be almost impossible to live near the edges because you'd feel like you're constantly being pulled off balance. The corners would be the worst. You'd basically slide away, making them totally uninhabitable. So forget about building a house there. Now let's talk about the oceans. On a cube Earth, water would still follow gravity, meaning it would gather in the middle of each face. That creates six massive square oceans. The areas near the edges and corners would stay mostly dry, turning into giant deserts or icy wastelands. In other words, life would only really thrive in the middle of each face. Our world would look like a strange patchwork, wet, habitable centers surrounded by unlivable edges. Weather would also go wild. On round Earth, air circulates smoothly around the globe. But on cube Earth, wind patterns would crash into corners, creating massive storms. Imagine hurricanes piling up at the edges where the airflow gets stuck. Life on a cube would mean permanent megastorm zones at the borders of each face. Seasons would be another nightmare. A round Earth tilts on its axis, which gives us winter, summer, and everything in between. But a cube spinning in space would not tilt the same way. Some faces would get too much sunlight, roasting under endless heat, while others might barely see the sun at all, trapped in eternal cold. Crops, animals, even humans would have to adapt to extreme differences depending on which face you lived on. And speaking of humans, what kind of civilizations might exist on a cube? Travel between faces would be extremely difficult. To go from one face to another, you'd have to climb steep slopes or even scale vertical walls. Maybe people would invent giant elevators or tunnels that cut them through the cube's interior. Each face might evolve its own isolated culture with little contact with the others. Imagine six different worlds, each living on one side of the cube. But here's the real deal breaker. Planets don't form as cubes. In reality, gravity always pulls matter into a sphere because that's the most stable shape. A cube planet could only exist if it were artificially built, like some megastructure straight out of science fiction. So if we ever did find a cube-shaped planet, it would almost certainly mean one thing. Someone made it. And that raises even more questions. So what if Earth was shaped like a cube? It would be bizarre, dangerous, and probably uninhabitable near the edges. Civilization would only survive in the middle of the faces, weather would be chaotic, and travel between regions nearly impossible. In short, the round Earth we live on is not only beautiful, it's practical. And maybe, just maybe, we should be grateful that our planet isn't shaped like a giant cosmic dice.